Hi guys, welcome back to another Genco lesson, and we're going to continue with the Python track. This is going to be lesson 8. It's going to be on strings and methods. So before we go into this presentation, let's just do a little recap of the previous one. In the previous lesson, we talked about the total graphics, and like I said in that lesson, that was like the beginning of what we're going to be talking about in these next two lessons. So I highly recommend you go and check that out before you check out this lesson and the next lesson as well. Also on this one, we're talking about strings and methods. So if you didn't see the lesson on data types, that will be really highly recommended to watch before you go. And even if you did watch it, I highly recommend you do the recap on that one before you go into this lesson, because this will introduce us more. This will dive us into strings, because remember in that lesson, we talked about strings, but we didn't go that deep into them. We're going to be talking about strings, and we're going to talk about some of the methods we use and some of the commonly ones we use, obviously. So please check that lesson out, and let's just get right into this one right now. So lesson 8, we're talking about strings and methods. So let's just get into the presentation. So methods. So what are methods, right? They act like functions almost, right? You could pretty much, it's like a command or a function. They tell a string what to do, right? So what we're going to be talking about in this one, we're going to talk about the strings. We'll talk about the objects and the methods. We're going to be talking about indexing and slicing a string. I think we talked about that in lesson 3, but going to do a little recap on that in this one. And we're also going to be talking about some of the commonly used string methods as well. So remember, what is a string? Let's do a little recap, okay? So a string is a sequence of 0 or more characters. So a string could have no characters. That is known as an empty string, or it can have an infinite number of characters, like the one right here, right? Lyrics, right? Here's the variable lyrics. We find that equal to a string, right? And the string is called roll on, Columbia roll on. And that's basically just a string, right? It's a string is just a number of words and characters in between two quotes, right? So right here, basically a definition, right? A string is delimited, begins and ends with by a single or double quotes. So a string could have either the single quotes or the double quotes. So it doesn't matter which one you use, as long as you have the two quotes around it, it is known as a string. And an empty string, obviously, I explained it just moments ago. It's just two quotes with no characters in between them. So that is known as an empty string. So quotes, characters, and strings, right? So you could include a single quote in a double quoted string, or a double quote in a single quoted string. And here's a good example, right? So all the world's a stage, right? Not just sentence, right? But look at the right here. We start the string with double quotes, but we have a single quote right in here. So that's fine. You could have the single quote as long as you close it out again with the double quotes. That will close the string. Once you open, remember, when you open a string with double quotes, you must end a string with double quotes. If you open a string with single quotes, you have to close the string with double quote, with a single quote. And another way you could do this is you could put and if you want to print this out in a string, and this would be a good way to do it, right? You could put a single quote in a single quote string, and then you could proceed with a backslash or escape character. So right here, will is equal to all the words backslash string, single quote s a stage, right? And when you print will, it will actually print out like this with the backslash. This is like it breaks it right there in between this white space. It breaks between the D and single quote. So when you print it, it will actually print like that when you print it in a Python editor. Putting a format character in a string, right? So if you want to do a formatting, and formatting mean it's like a function, right? Interpret so what is a format character? First of all, right? A format character is interpreted by the print function to change the layout of the text, right? So to put a format character in a string, we proceeded with a backslash, right? So let's say you want to say this, right? Juliet is good night, porting is such sweet 0, right? But you don't want this all in one line. You want to put this in two lines, right? So what we do is we start with the \n, right? And this will say good night, right? And it won't print in one line, it will print in 2 lines, right? So how we do that is we have to do the \n, and it'll put in 2 separate lines, right? So good night, and then porting, and you put the \n and put the porting is such sweet 0. You put it in the second line, right? So that's how we do a new line in Python. If you want these in 2 separate lines, you use the \n, it will start a new line. That's what the \n means, new line. So now let's talk about indexing a string and slicing a string, right? So an index of a string, right, if the first character of a string has 0 characters, right? It starts with the index 0, right? So this is known as zero-based indexing, right? Every time you start, the first character in a string always starts with 0, not 1. That's why we call this zero-based indexing. The first letter is always 0, so H in this case will be 0, right? So when we print greeting, when we set greeting equal to the string hello world, right? Or assign it to hello world, the string hello world, right? And you want to get the first character H, right? You have to say greeting and then grab its index. So H is at index 0. So we say greeting, and you put the square brackets and you put the index. The index we want is the first character. So we say greeting of 0. So greeting. And so this is how Python is interpreting, right? It's look at the word greeting. Okay, sees it. Now it's looking for the 0th index of this string, right? And obviously the 0th index is the first character, which is H. So it will print out H, right? So that's also known as the 0 character. Or you could do it this way, right? If you just say without the variable, you say hello world, right? And you want just put the square bracket next to it and put 0 in it. It's telling Python grab the 0th index, grab the 0th index in the string, and the 0th index in the string is H. So it'll print out H. And just like in the beginning of anything, you could also count backwards from the end of the string, right? And that starts with -1. So if you want to grab the last character, now the last character could be either, well, let's do this together, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? This is a character. 6, right? Spaces always count as characters, right? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? So you could say greeting of 11, and you'll get back D, right? And D will print out. But if you want to print from the end of the list, this could also be known as -1, right? So you can count backwards, and this will be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and so on, right? So if you want to grab D, you could say either greeting of 11, and it'll get out D, or you could say a simple way, you could say greeting of -1, and it'll grab out D as well. And that'll print D. So you could do either greeting of 11, or you could do greeting of -1, and it will still print out the same character D. It means the same thing. It's just we're going indexing backwards. When we index backwards, we start with -1. When we index from the beginning, we do zero-based indexing starting at index 0. So that's how we index a string. How do we slice a string? Okay, so slicing is the difference. And I think I talked about this in lesson 3, but the difference between indexing and slicing is that when you will never get an error when you slice a string out of range, right? It will still print out that whatever. It will just print out the rest of the string. If it goes out of range, it will just print out the whole rest of the string if it goes out of range. When you index and you go out of range, you'll actually get back an index error because you went out of range. But anyway, I could show you again on PyCharm, at the end of this. So slicing a string, right? So you can indexes to slice. You can use indexes to slice or extract a piece of a string, right? So you can get just a piece of that string, right? You don't want to get the whole string, but you just want to get like the piece. You want to get made from the middle, or you want to get from the end. You just want to get a piece of that string. So how we do it is we say, this is the format, right? This is your string variable, right? Whatever you call your string variable, square bracket, right? I, colon, J, right? And this means a string of, this means it is a substring that begins with index I, right? So it starts with index I and ends with, but does not include index J, right? So it ends at index J, but it does not include it. So you do not include the end. You go from the beginning to the end, but you do not include the end. And I'll show you that in the example. So let's take the word, let's do the variable again, greeting, right? Greeting is our variable. Let's assign that again to the string hello world, right? And let's say we want to get, just E and L. Let's say we just want to get that piece of the string. So what we have to do is say greeting. We grab greeting. So Python's going to say, oh, okay, I see the word greeting. I see the variable greeting. So I'll look at that. It is assigned to a string, and we're throwing the slicing method, we're throwing a slice in here. So square bracket, and remember slicing is with the colon. You need to have the colon to call it slicing. If you do not have that colon, it will be known as indexing. So 1, right? Let's slice from the first index. So the first index, remember the zero-based indexing, H is the 0th character, so we want to get just E and L. So E will be index 1. So let's grab the E. And we want to go up to index 3, but 9. We want to get just the L. So we cannot say 1 and 2, right? Because if we say, I know this is the second index, but if we say 1 colon 2, it's just going to grab the E. Remember, because we said it right here by this definition. A string of I colon J is the substring that begins with index I. So we're beginning with index I, which is known as, in this case, is the 1, and we end with index J. So if I did index J, but does not include index J, if I put a 2 there, then it's just going to grab the E, right? It's not going to grab the second because we're not including this second index. So we have to go one more up. So we say 1 colon 3, and now when we print it, it's just going to print E and L. It's going to go index 1, index 2, index 3, but it's just going to stop. It's going to cut off right there, and it's just going to print out the EL, which is what we wanted. So that's how you could slice. And again, you could slice backwards. You could go from negative index 3. You could go from -3 to -1. And it'll print out that piece of the string as well. So just like indexing, you could also do it backwards with the negative indexes with slicing. So let's talk about string methods, right? And that was the next part of this lesson. So what is a method, right? Like I said before, a method is a function that is bundled together with a particular type of object, right? A string method is a function that works on a string, and this is the format, right? The format, the syntax of the method is you start with the object name. So whatever string you call it, so the object we create, let's say we create, that'll be the object name, and then we put the dot. Remember the dot. So lesson 7, we talked about that dot, right? The dot is like it commands, it tells the object what to do, right? It's like a command. So this is saying object do this, and we throw that method, right? Name, and then we throw the parameter list. Now the parameter list could have no characters, or it could have infinite number of it could have no parameters, or it could have infinite number of parameters. That will be in the parentheses. So let's look at the example right here, right? Avocado, right? Let's say that's the object, we'll call it, right? Command index A. So what it's really telling us is take the word avocado and give me the index number at character A. So character A, like on zero-based indexing, is the 0th index. So that's why I print out 0, right? A is the first character in the string, and it's telling me give me that index. What is that index at character A? And that index is index 0, right? It's the first index. So zero-based indexing, the zeros, it will print out 0 because that is the 0th index. So that's what this is the object, right? Right here. Avocado, the string avocado is the object. The method right here is the index. And here, this is the parameter, right? And the parameter we're passing in is trying to give me the index at character A. And that's what it is. It returns the index of the first A in avocado, which is 0. One thing to know, just take a note of, strings are immutable, right? So what does it mean? So a string is immutable. So basically it means once it's created, once a string is created, it cannot be changed or modified. So you cannot throw in any append or remove a string, a character from a string. All you could do is throw in split a string, strip it, or you could do other things like slicing and indexing, but you can never add another character to it. That is the list, or you can do that with lists, but you cannot do that with strings. And you cannot do that with tuples either. But again, strings are immutable, so once they're created, you cannot change them. So once we define a string like hello greeting equals the string hello world, you cannot add another letter to that, or you cannot change it. It can only be like sliced or indexed with that. You cannot modify it. And when a string method returns a string, it's a different object. The original string cannot be changed, right? Right. So again, immutable, the original string cannot be changed. And now let's talk about some of the useful methods that Python has, right? So these are some of the Python string methods, right? Python has many very useful string methods, right? They're really powerful in some way. So here's this is the important thing. Do not waste your time on something that Python already built in. So it's saying right here on the bullet, you should always look for and use the existing string method before coding it again yourself. The safety time. Look at some of the built-in ones. These are very useful methods that you could use when you're coding something, coding your Python program. And so these are some of the ones that you could do, but which I'm going to be really talking about is the bottom one right here, right? We're going to be talking about these two right here, split and strip methods, right? So let's talk about those right now in the next 2 slides. Okay, so the split method, right? The string method split lets us separate a string into useful ports, right? So the common use is when you want to split. The common use for using this method is when you want to split a sentence into its individual words, right? Split by characters by default, but you can split by space characters by default, but you can give it a different separator string. What that means is when you just use a split and you don't put anything, you want to split on white spaces only, right? So white spaces mean like this, right? A space in between. That's by default. That's what split method is gonna do. It's just gonna split on white spaces. So you could pretty much draw lines right here on them. Right here. So separate. So instead of going by each character now we're gonna go by each word. So think of a list now, right? Now we're indexing. When we're indexing, now we're gonna be indexing like as we're going through a list instead of a string when we throw in the split method. So you could say now when you print s.split, right? It's actually, see, it split the string captain incoming transmission into its individual words, right? Captain, it grabbed this. It actually just grabbed this whole thing, right? It split on white spaces. Yes, you can see it grabbed this parentheses and split each of the words, right? Incoming. And then it gave that's another individual word. And then transmission, another individual word. So it actually split on white spaces. But now what I meant by this one right here, right? Split by space characters by default. So that's what this example is showing. But you could give it a different separator string. So let's say I don't want to split on white spaces, right? So let's say I want to split on this parenthesis, right? So right here, right? A1, A2, A1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's a string. Let's throw the split method on it. And let's give that parameter, let's pass in the parameter, and we want to split the separator parameter. We want to split on this this comma right here. So we put in 2 quotes, and we want with saying s dot split comma in the 2 strings, and now this is telling us don't split on white spaces anymore. So don't split here, split on the commas. So now it's actually going to give you a 1, right? Split, right? That's 1, a 2, split, right? So now look, as you can see, you're not having the comma anymore like you did here, because you're splitting on the comma instead of the white space. And that's very useful in Python, right? Split method when you have a character, you don't want to go by when you want to go through a for loop and you don't want to go through individual characters. You want to go through, and you have to use a string, but you don't want to go by its characters. You want to go by its words. You throw in the split method, and now it's just going to index to a like a list almost, right? So it's basically kind of like converting into a list, I could say, but not really, but it acts like a list now. So now when you want to index it, now this will be index 0, index 1, index 2, right? Instead of going in 1, 0, 1, 2, like by character, it's going, instead of going by character, now it's indexing word by word when you throw in the split method on a string. And the next one, not as commonly used, but we use this a lot in some cases when we use print, not as commonly used as a split. I can't say it's not common. This method's not commonly used, but less frequently than we use the split. But this comes in handy in some certain programs, certain programming assignments. So the strip method, right? So the string method strip cleans the edges of a string by removing the characters you specify, right? So what it means is it's just clean the edges, right? It's just clean the punctuations, right? It's getting rid of the punctuations, right? It's cleaning it up kind of at the end. So look at this example, right? S, right? We assign S to the string hello, right? And hello is surrounded by the parentheses hello, by the parentheses and ends with an exclamation point. But I don't want this. When I print this out, I don't want this, right? If I just print S, right, without throwing a method, it'll print this whole thing, right? It'll print out the parentheses and the punctuation, but I don't want those. When I print it, I just want the word hello. So what we do is we throw in the strip method, right? So strip is going to get rid of the parenthesis in the front, parenthesis in the back. Oh, well, you have to actually tell it what you want to strip, right? So let's say right here, right? Print.s.strip, and we want to strip the parenthesis out, and we want to strip the exclamation point. So so it's basically it's telling Python to get rid of this parenthesis, get rid of this exclamation point, get rid of this parenthesis, and just print this word. And as you can see, it just printed hello, right? And it did not print any of the punctuations because we're doing that strip method. So as you can see, it cleaned the edges, right? It only cleans the edges, doesn't clean. So if there was a punctuation right in the middle, that's not gonna go away because remember, strip only cleans the edges. It does not clean anything in the middle. It only cleans the ends. Unless you tell it to. So if you just so let's just say if you didn't have these parentheses, if you didn't have this exclamation point and you just threw in the strip, it's just going to get rid of this parenthesis. and these two parentheses, it's still going to keep the exclamation point. Because if you got rid of if this wasn't here, because strip is only clean the edges unless you tell otherwise. You pass in that parameter. And the string module contains, this is another way you could give it a punctuation. You can have punctuation. The string module contains a use for variable called punctuations, right? So when you import string, the module string, it has a nice thing called punctuations. So you can add punctuations as well. It's throwing this. It's just how like math has the module pi, right? This is another thing that string module contains. Or the total module has the total feature, right? The graphics. So the string module contains a variable called punctuations. And actually, this is the last slide. So I hope you guys understood this. I know it's a lot to take in and digest. I think some of this was like a recap in some of these slides, but I know a lot of these last two ones were new and we went a little more deep into them. So if you haven't checked out my lesson 3 on data types, go back to that. I talk about strings a little bit. I actually give a little bit more of a good explanation on strings, a little introductory here. This really we really dive more deeper into this one, but it's just another thing we could it's just another thing you could like refresh on before you go into this lesson. But anyway, this was a really useful lesson, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you had any questions, please just contact us at genco.us@gmail.com, and it will respond to your answers as quick as we can. Answer to your question as quick as we can, and I'll see you in the next video. And I hope you enjoyed this and have a wonderful day. So stay safe, everyone, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.